goes one. Hey, you shot my cow.
Alright, for YouTube, for everyone concerned, disclaimer, Myles is going to be doing, does all the research on all the guns. He's going to be doing most of the reviews on the guns. He's not a kid that got into dad's safe, found a camera, and is video and taping guns. He is under my supervision 100% of the time. Anytime you're messing with guns, I'm behind the camera all the time. So it's not like he just found a gun and put it on YouTube. I'm 100% under my supervision anytime he's touching guns and doing anything.
Привет, товарищ! Hey, Myles from Go-nee-uh Outdoors, and today, in this video, the long-awaited one that I've wanted to do for a very long time, here it is, the Mosin-Nagant. This is probably my favorite rifle ever made. One of them, at least. And today I'm going to be going over it. Now, the Mosin-Nagant is probably the most famous Russian rifle, aside from the AK, that was ever used by the Red Army. And it fires this big boy, the 7.62x54R. One of the largest shoulder-fired rifle calibers, within reason, of course. Now, this is probably the most famous Russian bolt-action rifle, as it was used in World War I and World War II, and even before World War I, and whatever Russia was doing before then. Now, to get where we are here, let's take a step back. Now, before they had bolt-action rifles, they were using what everyone else was using. Matchlock, wheel-lock, flintlock. And in 1869, they had the Kernka, which is a side breech loading 15.24 millimeter rifle. It was a single-shot breech loader. So by the side, you flip the side over, put the round in, and then close the breech. And it held its own until Hiram Burden, I'm probably butchering that name, came up with his Burdan rifle, which was a single-shot, either trapdoor or bolt-action rifle. And he also created the Burdan primer, which is a primer that has 2 holes in the back of the case instead of 1, like a normal box primer. And in 1877, Russia went to war with the Turks. And only a year later, after the war, they won. However, the single-shot rifle was starting to show its age because the Turks had already had lever-action rifles, and they were doing numbers against the Russian army. So Russia held trials for a new rifle, which Sergei Mosin and Leon Nagant made not this rifle, but its predecessor, the M91 Mosin, which was much heavier and longer. In 1992, about 3,000 Burdan 2s were ordered to be converted to the 7.62 cartridge, also made by Sergei Mosin. Now, one of its main complaints was that it was heavy. It weighed 9.5 pounds, and it was partially due to its just its design, because it was the early stage of the Mosin. It had a 31.5-inch barrel, which also contributed to its weight, and it also had rudimentary sights with a cone of olive rear sight and a barleycorn front sight. It wasn't terrible, just not none to write home about, and it could have been improved, and it was. Now, the main telling difference between an M91 and a 9130 like this one is the receiver. On the 9130, it's rounded, but on the 91, it has a hexagonal barrel. And also the sight, the rear sight is different. This is a ramp rear sight. And in 1930, he made this rifle, the 9130. Same rifle, just with improvements. An improvement on the 91's design by overall making the rifle a little bit lighter and improving the sights, which also improved accuracy by adding a ramped rear sight and a hooded front sight, which makes it harder to become unlodged. However, the main motive of the Mosin was cheap, reliable, and accurate. That's been the Russians' motive ever since they've adopted rifles. They wanted something that could be cheap, which is a big thing for Russian rifles, accurate, which those two don't necessarily go hand in hand, and reliable. Now that, they do very well, like the Kalashnikov and the Mosin. Now, the iron sights were not the only sights that were used by the Russian army. They also used telescopic scopes, like the PE and the PU. Now, in 1938, they made a shorter version of the Mosin called the M38, and it only had a 20-inch barrel, which that might seem kind of long. Like, that's the length of an M16 barrel, but compared to this thing, it's definitely a step above. And in World War II, since the Russians thought it would be more like World War I, like more trench warfare, they deployed the Mosin, which is just what they had. But in places like Stalingrad and Berlin, it was proved that it was a bit too cumbersome to be used near buildings and to be maneuvered around with this big thing. So in 1944, they made the M44, which was just an M38 with a folding bayonet on it. And that proved to be a very effective design because it is synonymous to what is known as a Mosin. It gets mixed up a lot, and the specifics are kind of lost. Now, the Mosin family served alongside with the SVT-40, made by Tokarev? Yeah, Tokarev. Which, it was a semi-auto 7.62, which you'd think that's a lot better, but when you're in a wartime economy, you have to have as many rifles as you can. So you're going to have to cut back on costs, and the SVT-40 was pretty expensive to build. So eventually it was dropped from service because it was just too expensive to keep making, so they kept making Mosins. Now in 1948, the AK eventually replaced it, being Russia's main service rifle up until now, really, because the AK platform is still the service rifle of Russia, being the AK-12, a more modern, the most modern version of it that we have. However, this is still being used in the battlefields in Ukraine right now. There is many pictures of soldiers using a 9130 and even an M91 Mosin, which is kind of crazy to think how old the rifle is and how prevalent it still is used today. Now, less about the history of it, more about the rifle itself. It feeds from a 5-round internal box magazine, and it can be fed individually, like that, and you just put all 5 rounds in one by one, or you can use a clip like this. It holds all 5 rounds in one clip, and you take the clip, put it on the feed lips, and push all 5 rounds into the magazine for much quicker loading. Boom. And then your gun's fully loaded. Here's a little close-up of the loading process with the stripper clip. Of course, the bolt has to be open, and there are little lips that match the shape of the clip. It goes in that lips. Oh, spring up in there. And the lips match in. Take the top round, push it into the magazine, take the clip out, and rifle loaded. Now, what I've experienced is with these round nose rounds, they will not feed into my rifle from the magazine. It's kind of annoying, I have to figure it out, which is one of the downsides of the Mosin. It can be quite finicky, and it's known to have a really sticky bolt, because it's so simple. And it isn't exactly the most genius design, but it was cheap, effective, and it absolutely did its job very well. Now more on the bullet itself instead of just the rifle. This was made the same year as the Mosin, in 1891, by Sergei Mosin, to feed from the Mosin. But the Mosin is not the only gun to use it. It was used in machine guns, marksman rifles, sniper rifles, and the list just goes on. I mean, the DP-27, the Mosin, the Dragunov, the SVK in modern rifles today being made by Kalashnikov. It proves how effective this design is. But it absolutely shows its age because it's a rimmed cartridge instead of a rimless. And the problems with that is that it doesn't like to feed in double stack magazines. Because what can happen a lot is if the rounds aren't stacked properly, the rims can get caught on each other and not feed to the gun and cause a jam, which is one of the big problems with the Dragunov. Now this specific 9130 was made in 1939. And it was probably issued to a soldier, possibly used in Stalingrad. There's no exact records that we have of that. But to think that this could have been used by some Soviet soldier and is now in the hands of some random American kid, kind of mind-blowing. And another mind-blowing thing about military surplus in general is that each piece of military surplus has a story. And even on these guns, each individual little scratch has a story. That's one of the reasons I really like buying milsurp things, like clothes, rifles, equipment. It's all such a cool idea to me, to be able to have the same things that was issued to some random soldier out in the middle of the Soviet Union, and it's now in my hands. Now, I've had this gun for a minute, and I've wanted to do this video for a while, and even before I bought a Mosin, I knew I wanted to get one, because I made this. This is an M2 50 cal ammo crate that I drew some Russian characters on. I learned the 7.62 hand markings, and I wrote them on here with just like paint marker. And honestly, I think it turned out quite well. Little extra feature. This is the bayonet. It's not a typical bayonet like a big knife or a sword that just attaches on. This is a dedicated bayonet that fits over the front sight. The way it works is there's a spring right there and a notch, and it goes on the rifle like that, push it against the spring, turn it, and it's locked in. No bayonet lugs on the rifle or nothing, just the front sight post. And of course the bayonet has a fluted shape, making it harder to stitch the wounds. Just goes to show a lot of history and thought went into this gun that's now in my hands. So we're going to shoot it. Again, like I said, the 5-round box magazine. And now I'm going to try the stripper clip like I did earlier in the skit. But one of the rounds is the round nose. That one in particular, actually. Because it's rounded off, it doesn't like to feed into my gun. So we're going to try putting it in the last round of the magazine and see if it does anything different. 5 rounds of 7.62. Like I said, Mosin's known for being real finicky. So let's leave that there. Okay, and no rounds aren't working either. There we go. Ready? All right. Hear something fly off? Oh. Yeah, I don't know why this thing keeps falling off. We'll just deploy it like I showed earlier. Trim another round. This is awesome. All right. Different target. Oh. Next up is the round nose. Oh. Bed. Perfect. See what it shoots. Just fine. Now, for disassembling and cleaning, it's stupid simple. The most you need to do is just take the bolt out so you can clean the barrel and the mechanism out. And to do that, take the bolt out, press the trigger. Ooh, that hurt. And the bolt just literally falls right out. And I did not want to drop it, but even the greatest of us dropped it. Now this can be taken apart further, but I can't put it together very quickly. And then to put it back in, there, you just shove it back in. And little bonus feature that I found out is this is the hammer and the safety. This piece right here, well that, got a really heavy spring on it though. And boom. Now it's unsafe. It's not easy to engage or disengage, but you just pull back on it, rotate it, and there. This also acts as a hammer. Clear it. If you watch, you can see it drop. You pull it back, reset it, and you can watch again. It drops. This goes to show how simple and effective this design is. Now the stripper clip's literally just a piece of metal, spring steel, with little lips at the bottom that hold the rounds in. It's also shaped to fit the Mosin. To weld these is simple. Take the round, push it in. Make sure the ring goes inside the divot in there, like that, and there. 5 rounds of 7.62. Throw it in the gun and good to go. And another thing that the Soviets did not usually have was a case. But for transportation, I have to use a case. And I had custom made this one with some iron-on paper. Made the design and then ironed it on, and I think it turned out amazing. I really like how it turned out.
Thanks for watching. Myles from Go-nee-uh Outdoors. Think of it, support troops, we'll catch some deers.